It was just a glance, a nothing moment, eyes meeting across a silent Upper West Side apartment, but it replayed in my mind like a broken record. I'd thrown on a robe, something I shouldn't have, and walked past him that morning. His gaze, Michael's gaze, lingered, slow, deliberate, not just polite curiosity. It was a current, something charged in the air between us, an unspoken dare. For the first time in years, I didn't know if I should retreat or lean in. Sunday morning in the city, a rare hush blanketing even Manhattan. Birdsong from Central Park drifted in, the only sound in the still apartment. I was savoring the quiet, a stillness I used to crave. Michael had been staying with me for weeks now, filling the cavern David had left in ways I hadn't anticipated. Temporary, I'd told myself, just until he figured out his next move after Columbia. But even in weeks, he'd breathed life back into this place, and something else, something in me I hated to admit. That morning, clothes were an afterthought. A silk robe, David's, years old, a whisper against my skin. Not revealing exactly, but intimate, more so than anything I'd usually wear around the apartment. I hadn't expected Michael up so early, assuming he'd still be asleep. But then, there he was, at the end of the hall, leaning against the wall, barefoot, coffee mug in hand. The ghost of a smile on his lips died the second I stepped into view. His eyes moved over me, a slow burn lingering a breath too long before meeting mine. "Morning," he said, voice casual, but his eyes were a different story. "Good morning," I replied, too quickly, clutching my tea like it was the only solid thing in the room, moving past him, towards the kitchen. I felt his gaze follow, a physical heat rising in my cheeks as I escaped. My heart hammered, a frantic rhythm I couldn't explain, my body suddenly hyper-aware. Nothing, I told myself again, just a look. But that look clung to me all day. Michael had always been polite, reserved, even. Nothing like David, who was all bravado and charm, owning every room he walked into. Michael was quieter, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened before he spoke. It had taken years for him to warm up to me when David and I first married. By the time he left for NYU, we'd settled into a comfortable, distant understanding. But the man who returned to my apartment after David's death wasn't the boy who'd left. Michael had grown into himself. Confidence radiated off him now, a self-assurance that was unsettling. And it wasn't just his looks, though lying about that would be foolish. Broad shoulders, a sharp jawline, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Impossible to ignore. But it was more than that. It was the way he inhabited the apartment, his presence quiet but undeniable. The way he made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't in years. And now, with that lingering look from the hallway burned into my memory, everything felt different, shifted on its axis. I tried to shake it off, burying myself in meaningless tasks all day, cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized the pantry, even spent an hour on the fire escape, pretending to garden. But no matter how hard I worked, the image of Michael, that look, stayed with me, a constant undercurrent. That evening, we sat down for dinner, a habit we'd fallen into since he moved in. Conversation was light, easy, but I couldn't ignore the way his eyes kept finding mine, lingering a fraction too long when I spoke. "You've been busy today," he said, tone casual, leaning back in his chair. I shrugged, eyes fixed on my plate, just trying to be productive. His lips quirked into a small smile. "You don't always have to be busy, you know." The comment caught me off guard. I looked up, meeting his gaze across the small dining table. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," he said quickly, but his expression softened. "Just, you deserve a break sometimes." The way he said it, so sincere, so gentle, left me momentarily speechless. I forced a smile, changing the subject, but his words hung in the air long after dinner was over. That night, in bed, sleep elusive, I replayed Michael's look in the hallway again and again. The intensity, the way it made me feel both exposed and strangely alive. A feeling I hadn't anticipated, one I wasn't sure I wanted, but it was there, undeniable, and no amount of logic could make it disappear. The days that followed were a careful dance, though I wasn't sure who was leading. Keep distance, I told myself. Maintain the boundaries that had always been there. But Michael's presence was magnetic, and no matter how hard I tried, I found myself drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain, couldn't justify. It started small. He'd join me on the fire escape, offering to help with the pathetic potted plants, pretending to know something about gardening. Politeness, I told myself, a way to fill the time. But then there were moments that lingered, moments that felt like more. One afternoon, kneeling in the dirt, wrestling with a weed, Michael crouched beside me, his hands rougher than I expected, brushed against mine, taking hold of the same stubborn root. "Here," he said softly. "Let me." I let go, watching his strong hands work the weed free. He looked up, a faint smile on his lips, and a strange flutter in my chest. "You make it look easy," I said, trying for light. "It's all about the angle," he replied, smile widening for a moment. We just looked at each other, sunlight glinting off his dark hair. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence. "Thanks," I murmured, turning back to the plants, but I could feel his gaze and it made my hands tremble. That evening, after dinner, we sat in the living room. Rain lashed against the windows, a city storm rolling in. Michael was stretched out on the couch, flipping through a book while I sat in the armchair, tea in hand. "I don't know how you stay so calm," he said suddenly, breaking the quiet. I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" He closed the book, his gaze meeting mine. "This apartment, it's so quiet. Doesn't it ever get overwhelming?" I hesitated, fingers tightening around the mug. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I'm used to it." Michael nodded, leaning forward slightly. "I don't think I could do it. I need noise, movement, something to keep my mind busy." I smiled. "That's why you're always fixing things, isn't it?" He chuckled. "Maybe." Silence fell, heavy with unspoken words. "I didn't mean to bring it up," he said finally, softer. I don't know. I feel like you deserve more than this." The sincerity in his voice took me off guard. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. "More than what?" He gestured vaguely around the room. "This quiet, this loneliness. You deserve to feel alive." The word hit me like a jolt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I'm fine, Michael," I said quickly, setting the mug down, standing. "You don't need to worry about me." But as I walked past him, I felt his eyes, steady and unflinching. The next day, I found Michael in the spare room, sorting through boxes of David's things. He looked up as I stepped inside, his expression softening. "Need something?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "No," I said, hesitating in the doorway. "Just wanted to see what you were up to." He smiled, setting down a framed photo. "Just trying to make sense of all this. David kept everything." I stepped closer, eyes scanning the overflowing boxes. He always said, "You never know when you might need something." Michael laughed, a short, humorless sound. Sounds like him. For a moment, silence hung heavy, David's absence a tangible weight in the small room. Then Michael turned to me, gaze steady. "Do you miss him?" The question caught me off guard, a lump rising in my throat. "Every day," I admitted. Michael nodded, expression unreadable. "Me too." I looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "You don't talk about him much." He shrugged, eyes dropping to the floor. "It's hard. He wasn't around a lot when I was growing up, but he tried in his own way." "He loved you," I said quietly. Michael looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "I know." He paused, then, "And I think he'd want you to be happy." The words hung in the air between us, heavy, unspoken. I didn't know what to say, just nodded, chest tight with emotions I couldn't name. That evening, washing dishes, I felt Michael before I heard him. He stepped into the kitchen, leaning against the counter, watching me. "You don't have to do all that," he said, voice low. "I don't mind," I replied, not looking at him. Silence, thick and charged. "Sarah," he said softly, and the way he said my name made me stop. I turned, heart pounding. "What?" He hesitated, gaze searching mine. "You don't always have to do it alone." Words failed me. The sincerity in his voice, the way he looked at me, it was too much. I turned back to the sink, hands trembling as I picked up a plate. But his words echoed in my mind long after he'd left the room. "You don't always have to do it alone." The phrase settled in my chest, a weight I couldn't ignore. Years spent convincing myself I was fine, didn't need anyone, now felt like a fragile lie with Michael here. He was around more that week, taking on small projects, fixing a broken cabinet, organizing the chaotic storage room. His presence was constant, grounding, yet stirring something restless within me. One night, as dusk bled into night, the apartment settling into its usual quiet, I found myself drawn to the living room. Michael was there, sprawled on the couch, a book on his chest, lamplight casting shadows across his face. For a moment, I just stood there watching him. "Can't sleep?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head, moving further into the room. "Not really." He sat up, placing the book on the coffee table. "Want to sit?" Hesitation, then I sank into the armchair across from him. Silence, heavy, waiting to be broken. "I was thinking about David today," I said, voice barely a whisper. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "About him?" "Just how he used to fill this apartment. It feels so quiet without him." Michael's gaze was steady, eyes filled with something I couldn't decipher. "Doesn't feel quiet to me," he said softly. My breath caught. Something in his tone, in the way he looked at me, electrified the air. I opened my mouth to speak, but words wouldn't come. He stood, crossing the room to kneel in front of my chair. My heart leaped. His hand reached for mine, his touch warm, steady. "Sarah," he said, my name a quiet plea. "Michael," I whispered, voice trembling. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize every detail. His thumb brushed over my hand. "Tell me I'm imagining this," he said, voice raw. I couldn't. It wasn't imagination. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, voice breaking. "Neither do I," he said, "but I can't stop thinking about you, about us." A shiver ran through me. Before I could think, my free hand reached up, touched his face. His eyes fluttered shut, then opened, filled with longing that ached in my chest. "Michael, we can't," I started, but the words sounded hollow. "Why not?" he asked, voice quiet but firm. "Because it's wrong. Because it's complicated. Because it could ruin everything." But none of those reasons felt strong enough to make me pull away. The next day, avoidance was the only strategy. Chores, endless chores, cleaning rooms that were already spotless, reorganizing the pantry for the third time that month. But the memory of his touch, his gaze, haunted me. By midday, tension was a physical ache. I found myself in the small office, rearranging books, a desperate attempt to keep my hands busy. "Do you need help with that?" Michael's voice from the doorway made me jump. The book slipped, hitting the floor. "No," I said quickly, bending to pick it up. "I've got it." He stepped into the room, his presence shrinking the space, making it hard to breathe. "Sarah, we need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, turning back to the shelves. "Why not?" he asked, gentle but insistent. "Because..." I trailed off, hands trembling as I placed the book back. "Because you're scared," he said, stepping closer. I turned to face him, back against the bookshelf. "Of course I'm scared," voice rising. This isn't supposed to happen." "But it did," he said, calm. "Pretending it didn't won't make it go away." Words died in my throat. He stepped closer, hands bracing against the shelves on either side, trapping me. "Sarah," he said softly, voice a whisper against my skin. "Just tell me you don't feel the same, and I'll walk away." I couldn't. It wasn't true. Instead, my hand trembling reached up, rested against his chest. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, voice breaking. "You don't have to do anything," he said, leaning in until our foreheads touched. "Just let me in." And I did. That evening, the storm returned, rain pounding, thunder echoing. We sat on the couch, silence heavy but not strained. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly, voice low. I looked at him, chest tight. "No," I said honestly. He nodded, expression softening. "Neither do I." Tension remained, but different now, less burden, more promise. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. When he leaned in, his lips to mine, I didn't stop him. Quiet in the apartment that night, rain outside softening to a drizzle. Living room, book in my lap, pages unturned for hours. Mind elsewhere, on him, on moments shared, on the way his gaze made me feel undone. Footsteps. Then Michael in the doorway, his presence filling the space, impossible to ignore. Barefoot, rumpled shirt, quiet intensity that quickened my pulse. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head, setting the book aside. "No, you?" He shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "Not really." Silence hung, charged, thick with unspoken words. "Michael," I began, but he cut me off. "Can I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the couch. Hesitation, chest tightening, but I nodded. He sat, leaving a space that made the silence unbearable. Heat of him, his presence pulling me in. "We need to talk," he said, finally, quiet but firm. I turned, breath catching. "About..." "You know what?" he said, gaze meeting mine. I looked away, hands twisting in my lap. "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can," he said gently, reaching for my hand, his touch warm, grounding. "Just tell me how you feel." Swallowing hard, chest tight. "It's complicated," I said. "I don't care," he replied, soft but resolute. I looked up, eyes burning. "It's not that simple, Michael. It's wrong." "Why?" Thumb brushing my hand. "Because people might not understand. Because it scares you. Because it scares me too, Michael." "I know," he said. "But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting you." His words cracked my walls, defenses crumbling. "Michael," I whispered, voice trembling. He leaned in, forehead to mine. "Just tell me to stop," he murmured. If you don't feel the same, say the word, I'll leave you alone. But if you do, I couldn't say it. Couldn't tell him to stop. Instead, I closed the distance, lips brushing his tentative kiss, soft, hesitant, but then his hand cupped my cheek, deepening it. Years of longing, loneliness, denying myself life poured into that kiss. Hands gentle, insistent, igniting something I thought long dead. Living room blurred, soft whispers, quiet gasps, movement slow, deliberate, exploring boundaries. Bedroom finally, rain outside intensifying, lightning flashing. Michael paused at the doorway, gaze searching. Are you sure? Whisper voice. Yes, I said, the word leaving me without hesitation. Tenderness unfolded, breathtaking. Michael's touch reverent, movements deliberate, like I might vanish. I surrendered to him, to the way he made me feel seen, wanted. Not just physical, emotional, a connection impossibly deep, finding something we hadn't known we'd lost. Later, tangled beneath sheets, room bathed in storm glow. Michael's arm around my waist, fingers tracing patterns. Are you okay? Voice breaking the quiet. Nodded, throat tight. Yes, softly. He kissed my forehead, pulling me closer. I meant it, he murmured. Don't care how complicated, just want to be with you. Tears stung, face buried against his chest. Don't know what happens next, voice trembling. We'll figure it out, he said, steady tone, one step at a time. Woke before dawn, apartment still gray. Stillness, rhythmic breathing beside me, Michael's arm around my waist, warmth, steady presence. Last night, dreamlike, fragile, surreal. But hand on my hip, chest rising and falling, real. Mind a whirlwind, relief, guilt, fear, and something dangerously close to joy. Slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. Robe, kitchen, floorboards creaking. Apartment different this morning, quieter, peaceful. Coffee, scent-filling air, leaning against counter, window. Garden glistened with dew, daisies still standing tall. Last night, guard down, completely. Now, unsure how to rebuild it. Everything precarious, edge of something unseen. Morning, Michael's voice startled me. Doorway, rumpled hair, t-shirt, softness in his eyes. Good morning, voice quieter than intended. He poured coffee, leaning against the island. Silence, filled with unsaid things. Are you okay? Tone careful. Nodded, unsure if true. Are you? Faint smile, setting mug down. I am, if you are. Simplicity tightened my throat, looked down, tracing mug edge. Don't know what happens now, I admitted. Neither do I, voice steady. But I don't regret it, Sarah, not for a second. Looked up, his words a balm. Don't regret it either, softly, relief in his expression. He closed the distance, hand finding mine, fingers intertwining, gentle squeeze. We'll figure it out, voice calm, sure. Nodded, holding his hand, only steady thing. Later, porch, second coffee, sunlight warming skin. Michael in the garden, pulling weeds, deliberate movements, taming overgrowth. Natural, at ease, small smile. Guilt lingered, quiet reminder of the line crossed. But something else too, something years absent. Hope. Path uncertain, questions unanswered, but for the first time not afraid to face it. Birds, world waking, let myself believe maybe, just maybe, okay to feel alive again.